are still in this never-ending international break ahead of Gameweek 9. In my last two videos, I took you through some of the thinking behind my wildcard team for Gameweek 9. Today, what I'd like to share with you are a few thoughts on captaincy options, because I think this week more than most it's a really tough one. There are so many valid options I think this week, and also in a sense so few so few options, but it's really, I don't think it's obvious who the best captain is this week. So I wanted to go through each of the fixtures, or at least some of the key fixtures in terms of captaincy, and identify some of the players we might want to consider, and really compare those players to come to some kind of conclusion on who I think are the best captaincy choices for Game Week 9. So these are the fixtures on the screen right now. And the first game of the weekend will be Newcastle versus Chelsea. Now for me, there is a very valid, very standout captaincy option in this game, and that is Hakim Ziyech. Or is it Hakim Ziyech? I don't know what the correct pronunciation is. But anyway, I naturally go with Ziyech. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One, I think Ziyech has already shown that he is going to be a real threat this season, creatively, primarily, but also as a goal scorer. He's getting in all the right positions. He's clearly got that wand of a left foot. And I think it's a safe assumption to say that he'll end this season with a lot of assists. I'm going to get up onto one of my other tabs, understat.com, where I get plenty of my expected goals and expected assist data. And I'm scrolling down here, and I've got player level data. I've ranked all Premier League players in descending order of expected assists, and you'll see that Hakim Ziyech is currently 5th, having played literally half the games of most other players in the league, or at least most other players on this list, at the top of this list. And that's mad. The guy is producing chances at a rate which is way beyond anyone else in the league right now. Like his expected assists per minute is through the roof. In fact, I've got it right here. Expected assists per 90. He's over 1. The next best I can see here is 0.48 Harry Kane. And if I rank everyone by expected assists per 90, you've obviously got a few guys who've played very, very few minutes. You know, a tiny sample size. But then, after Ziyech, there's really no one competing with him. It's actually quite ridiculous. So that's, I think the first thing to say about Ziyech is he's a really good player. The second thing to say is I think he's got a really good fixture. I think it's a better fixture than most people would instinctively say. Away to Newcastle, I think in most people's minds is a tough one. I'm not going to say St James's Park is a fortress, exactly, but people, I think in their minds, have it down as a tough place to go and score goals. And I think that's actually just not true at all. We know that under Steve Bruce, Newcastle play a far more expansive game when they're playing at home than they do away from them. At home, yes, they sit back and they absorb. At home, they're a bit more expansive, they take more risks and they concede goals as a result. Again, I'm going to go back to understat here. And I've got teams ranked by expected goals against, where West Brom are the worst in the league on that front and Chelsea are the best. And you'll see Newcastle rank really high. They rank 5th. Newcastle at home, and I think, obviously this stat includes all games home and away, but I think it's even worse when they're at home. At least that's my impression. I haven't got the numbers here to back that up. So I'm not going to claim that it's definitely the case, but my impression is that their defence is worse at home. And they already have one of the least good defences in the league. So for me, this is a really good fixture for a really good player, and I think Ziyech has to be an option. Now, Aston Villa versus Brighton. I think it's going to be a really good game of football, regardless of any FPL interest. That's a really interesting game. One team who have really underachieved this season relative to their performance, to a team, or against a team, who, it's hard to say, but I think you could argue have overachieved. I don't know if Aston Villa are going to keep up getting the results they have been getting. And I think this game is going to really give us a good hint of whether or not they are going to be able to keep this up. But anyway, the obvious captaincy choice in this game is Jack Grealish. And I've seen a lot of people stick the armband on him already. I don't know necessarily if I agree. So the first thing I would say here is, and I'm going to look at team level data, and I'm going to rank teams in descending order of expected goals. And they're a Villa. And they rank 6th in the league, having only played 7 games. So really, you'd expect them to have, if we're looking at in terms of expected goals per game, they're actually somewhere in the region of Everton and Chelsea. In fact, they're higher than that. In fact, they might even be up here with, with Leicester, or even higher than Leicester. So the point is, Aston Villa score a lot of goals, or at least they're expected to score a lot of goals. But my hesitation is that Liverpool game, that 7-2, was a complete freak game. I don't know what their XG was that day, but it must have been huge. And I wonder if that's just throwing their numbers off a little bit. Because the reality is, at least in my mind, that man for man, they're still not that great an attacking unit. At least no greater really than they were last season when they didn't score that many goals. Of course, the really big addition addition this season, the big change is Ollie Watkins up front, and I think he's shown that he can score goals. I think he's got a lot of ability. But I still need more evidence, I think. I need more evidence that Villa are going to be able to consistently keep scoring goals. Anyway, having said that, let's have a quick look at Jack Grealish's own stats. And you know what? They are through the roof. His expected assists are second only to Harry Kane, and in fact he's pretty much matching Harry Kane on expected assists per 90. And his expected goals are also very high, and per 90 very high. He doesn't quite make it onto the first page for per 90 stats, but he's clearly producing a lot of chances, clearly involved in most of Aston Villa's attacking play, and I think just, a basic eye test would tell you that much. Aston Villa are Jack Grealish. They really do depend on him when you go through him. And I guess that's the thinking behind making him captain. But for me, this is not as good a fixture as Newcastle away. I mean, let's take a look at expected goals against. Brighton are way down. You can see they've really underachieved. They conceded 14 goals, when really you only expect them to have conceded 9. So I think the Brighton defence is actually much stronger than people might give it credit for. So for me, it's a tough fixture. And as great a player as Jack Grealish is, I think Hakim Ziyech is a better captaincy choice. Now, Spurs versus City, this is really interesting. So on the Spurs side, I think the obvious option here is Harry Kane, arguably Son, but I think if you're going to captain a Spurs player, I think Kane would be the one. And then on the City side of things, there are options. Gabriel Jesus, Kevin De Bruyne. I don't know if Raheem Sterling is expected to play, I'm not sure. I think if Sterling is fit, he has to be an option. But the problem with the City players, for a start, is most of them just aren't that well owned at this point. Because City just haven't performed. And also they've been interrupted by fixtures and some injuries and so on. So it's at this point it's hard to have many City players in your team, and it's hard to know which ones to have. And that makes them all. And that, at least in my position, the only one I have is Cancelo, and I won't be captaining Cancelo. But let's assume you do own a De Bruyne or a Jesus. Do I think De Bruyne and Jesus are good captaincy options? In my experience as a Spurs fan, City score a lot of goals against us. So that's my worry. If we're looking at expected goals, City are actually, they're lower than you might expect. I mean, of course, they have played one game fewer, so maybe the reality is that per game or per 90, they're somewhere around Leeds kind of level. And that to me is saying, hold off Man City. They're just not performing at the level we expect this season, and there's no reason to think that that's going to change against Spurs. I think that's really the the summary statement here. And if you look at expected goals against, Spurs are really good. Spurs have a really solid defence. The fourth best in the league at this point. In fact, probably better than that, given Villa and Burnley have played a game fewer. Spurs might even have the second best defence. Kind of closer to the Mourinho of old. So for me, I don't think I'd consider captaining a City player this week. Now, would I consider captaining Harry Kane? His stats are insane. They're ridiculous. They're completely broken. The man is so good at football right now. And he's one of the best goal scorers and one of the best creators in the league. Not to mention he's on penalties. So, for me, he's always got to be a consideration purely on that basis. Like, I don't know if I expect Spurs to beat City or to really get much out of the game. I don't have a clue what to expect. It's going to be a lottery. But I think you can say, if Spurs are to get something, there's a really high chance that Harry Kane will be involved. And I think for that reason, he's got to be a consideration. Let's just have a look at where Man City rank on expected goals against. Okay, they're pretty low down. Having played that game fewer, so maybe they're kind of mid-table-y. They've got an average defence based on the 8 games or the 7 games played so far. I mean, I should say at this point, these are tiny sample sizes we're dealing with, so there's nothing you can really firmly conclude, of course. But it's the best we've got. Unless you want to base your thinking entirely on the eye test, which is also valid. But I think even the eye test kind of agrees with what the data is saying. That City have a bit of a soft belly. Teams can score goals against them, and Spurs will get chances on the break. Especially when you think of how these two styles of football fit together. City will dominate the ball, but Spurs are just so quick on the counter. If they've got that front three of Son, Kane, Gareth Bale, it's going to be quite exciting to watch, I think. And I think Kane will really be the focal point of those counterattacks. He'll hold the ball up, and then he'll try to play in one of Son or Bale for these counter-attacking goals. But anyway, for me, Kane is an option. I think, at the moment, I think it's between him and Ziyech for me. Now, Man U versus West Brom. Mr. Bruno Fernandes. I would say this. Man United are not a good football team. I don't think Solskjaer will be their manager come the end of the season. But so much of what they do goes through Bruno Fernandes, and that's something you can't ignore. And this is the single easiest fixture in the league this season. West Brom are complete garbage. I mean, Fulham are also pretty garbage. The two are awful teams. I don't know if they're quite Derby County levels, but they're not far off. So Bruno Fernandes, amazing fixture, the best he'll have, but ultimately not in an amazing team. So the question is, or I think the way to put it is this: if you are ever going to captain Bruno Fernandes, this is the week to do it. So if you own Bruno Fernandes, and you own him because you think he's a captaincy option, then this just has to be the week you do it, because you'll never get a better opportunity than this. So I think that's the first thing I'd say. Now, I don't own Bruno Fernandes, so this isn't something that's going to come into my own thinking, but let's just take a look at his stats to kind of think about how much of a captaincy option we really think it is. You may be one of those people who does own him, but doesn't necessarily own him to be a captaincy option. Maybe you also own Salah and Kane as captaincy options. In that case, let's think about whether Bruno Fernandes might make a good backup captain for this week in the absence of a Salah, who of course is out ill for game week 9. So, ranked by expected assists, Bruno Fernandes is on the front page, which I guess is 10th. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep, Bruno Fernandes is 10th. And he has a very similar expected goals to Jack Grealish. So what that tells me is, if I'm comparing him against other captaincy options, I think the most obvious comparison to make here is Jack Grealish. Bruno Fernandes and Jack Grealish are the centre points, the focal points of their respective teams. And neither of those teams are in themselves amazing. They are both probably going to end up mid-table by the end of the season, Manchester United and Aston Villa. So if that's our best comparison, we can directly compare the stats between the two players, and for me the stats say Grealish is a similar goal scoring threat, but a way bigger creative threat than Bruno Fernandes, and that's a big deal. And if I compare Man U and Aston Villa as teams by expected goals, Villa are so far ahead of Man U, so far ahead in expected goals. The one advantage that Bruno Fernandes has is that fixture. West Brom are the worst defence in the league. They're the worst team in the league. As I say, perhaps with Fulham. And Brighton are a much better team defensively. And so the question is the difference in fixture enough to sway things between Bruno Fernandes and Jack Grealish? And I really don't know. I think they're very similar captaincy options. But again, in my view, neither is as good an option as Hakim Ziyech or Harry Kane. And I think that might be a controversial statement. I think we'll find that Bruno Fernandes is the most popular captaincy choice this week. But let me be clear, Man United are a bad football team, and the reason they're a bad football team is because they can only do one thing well, and that is play on the counter. They can break quickly with players like Rashford and Martial, and they're just not going to have any opportunity to do that at home to West Brom. They're going to have to break West Brom down. And of course, if anyone is able to do it, it'll be Bruno Fernandes, but I just don't see it. I really don't see it. I think Man U will struggle. And I think people are going to make a mistake captaining Bruno Fernandes. is a captaincy option, a valid captaincy option. I've already said how bad I think Fulham are, and I think the stats reflect that. And so for me, this is a very good fixture away to Fulham, a very good fixture. And Everton, people have called on them a little bit because of recent results. But the reality is, even when they've been playing badly, Calvert-Lewin has been getting chances and he has been scoring goals. It's ridiculous. So I see no reason why that should stop. Calvert-Lewin will get chances again. I mean, look at this. I've ranked them by XG. Everton are right up there. They're right up there. They create chances for Calvert-Lewin. And he's shown himself this season to be a competent enough finisher to be taking those chances. James Rodriguez actually ranks super highly for expected assists. That's very impressive. And Calvert-Lewin, yeah, he's in, is that fourth? Or is that fifth? 1, 2, 3, 4. He's fifth for XG. But something to bear in mind is that all 4 of the guys above him are on penalties. And perhaps on non-penalty XG, Calvert-Lewin is number 1 in the league at this point in the season. So for me, Calvert-Lewin is a really valid option. Do I rate him on the level of Harry Kane and Hakim Ziyech? I don't know. I think the more I've been thinking about this, I think for me Ziyech is the standout, and I think that is the option. I think that's who I'm going to be captaining. And as good as Dominic Calvert-Lewin is, and as well as he's been doing this season, I think Ziyech is the standout option this week. Now the final game, Liverpool versus Leicester, the final game I want to discuss. Look, I'm not even going to consider Vardy as an option. Some people might have Vardy and might want to captain him. That's fine. But for me, away to the champions, even with their defensive injuries or with their injuries in general, there's no. I wouldn't be comfortable captaining a player away to Liverpool. That's my honest opinion. So the question is there anyone at Liverpool you would want to captain? And I think the only option here really is Sadio Mane. If you own Sadio Mane, if you're one of those people who owns him, he's right up there for expected goals. He's 10th in expected goals. He's doing all right on expected assists. It might be page 3. He's 25th for expected assists, having played only 7 games as well. I think he's a very good player. I think he's one of the best players in the league. But Leicester home is a difficult fixture. Let's see where Leicester rank in terms of expected goals against. Yeah, they've got an above average defence, I'd say. Above average defence. In fact, quite a bit better than average given they've played 8 games and some of the teams below them only played 7. So very solid defence. And I think really what I'm getting at is I would be scared to captain Mane, and honestly I don't know how many people actually own him. So for me, kind of having said all of that, it really boils down to one player, and that is Hakim Ziyech. I think he is the option. So I'm going to make him my captain now. I'll make Kane my vice. I think he's the second best option. And really theory, that's my case for Hakim Ziyech. We'll see if I got it right or if I got it completely wrong. That's very plausible. But anyway, I actually really enjoyed doing that, kind of thinking through the alternatives there, 'cause now I feel much more comfortable in my decision. I feel even if I get it wrong, there was at least some reason behind my decision making, and that's a good place to be. So, having said all of that, I'm very excited for this game week. Look forward to seeing what happens, and I will catch up with you all afterwards. So, thank you very much for joining. I hope you found this informative